Today's reading is about the parables of the lost sheep and silver coin. The first illustrates God's concern for those who lack the ability to find him. Instead, God seeks them. The second parable intensifies the feeling of human helplessness and divine concern. Reading from the first part of Luke 15. Now all the tax collectors and sinners were coming near to listen to him. And the Pharisees and the scribes were grumbling and saying, "This fellow welcomes sinners and eats with them." So he told them this parable. Which of you, having 100 sheep and losing one of them, does not leave the 99 in the wilderness and go after the one that is lost until he finds it? When he found it, he lays it on his shoulders and rejoices. And when he comes home, he calls together his friends and neighbors, saying to them, "Rejoice with me. I have found my sheep that was lost." Just so, I tell you, there will be more joy in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous people who need no repentance. Or what woman, having 10 silver coins, if she loses one of them, does not light a lamp, sweep the house, and search carefully until she finds it? When she has found it, she calls together her friends and neighbors, saying, "Rejoice with me. I've found the coin that I've lost." Just so, I tell you, there is joy in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner who repents. Hear what the Holy Spirit is saying to the church.
Will you join me in prayer? Loving God, we open to your presence and to your word and to your wisdom in this moment, and I ask that you take the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts and the lives that we live and shape them according to your life-giving Spirit. Amen. Some years ago, after I had been in ministry in Salmon Arm for a number of years and people had started to get to know me, I was invited to go to an Alcoholics Anonymous roundup. Ever heard of a roundup before? I hadn't at the time, so this was a learning experience for me. A roundup is a yearly gathering of people involved in 12-step programs, and in this particular case, it was Alcoholics Anonymous. In Salmon Arm, that means a few hundred people gather at a community center, and there's talks, and there's discussions, and there's really good food. And I was there for the Saturday evening. It's a whole weekend event. Invited to come and speak for 5 minutes on the spiritual dimensions of Alcoholics Anonymous. I know. That's a funny thing to contemplate. I mean, not the spiritual dimensions of Alcoholics Anonymous, but the idea of a preacher speaking for 5 minutes on any particular subject. It felt like a good old-fashioned revival meeting. Honestly, that's the feel that this gathering had. Milestones of sobriety were raucously celebrated with huge rounds of applause. A very engaging, richly honest speaker who told us of her own journey of recovery with enough detail that you knew she had scraped bottom and come back. And with enough humor and humility that you could bear the hearing of her story. The Spirit was present, uniting us as simple human beings struggling to make our way in the world. Which made my job of pointing out the spiritual dimensions really, really easy. And everyone in the room had one cluster of experience in common, and we knew it. At some point in time, we had all been lost. And at some point in time, we had all been found. And likely at other points in time, we were lost again and found again and lost again and found again. And we were all somewhere on the path. Everyone was on a different place on the road, going one way or another. The destination felt dodgy at the best of times because every time you round a curve thinking that you're heading for the finish line, a whole new vista of unfamiliar territory would open up. But as I left that evening, I'll always remember it. I could think of no more worthy road to be on with others, because I knew that along with heartache and hope, the very presence of God, God's very self, could be found on the road, and that it was in some way the road home. Now, my connection with AA at that point had been mostly through friends and through experience of having people come and ask me if I would be with them in their fifth step. Now, if you're unfamiliar with AA, fifth step logically follows the fourth step, which is the fourth step being a fearless and searching moral inventory of your life. Anybody who's going to embark on that step has my respect. The fifth step, then, is when after a person has done that, they come to a person and tell the story. Tell it all. Get it off your shoulders. Get it off your chest. Openly, honestly, fully. So going to this roundup was such a gift, because I was led into a community of people who had been lost and found and were honest about it and willing to just be real with each other, fiercely real. It felt really sacred. It felt to me like church at its best. Church the way I think God longs for church to be. The trouble with church, the trouble with any gathering of human beings is that we're human. And we create human organizations and institutions. We get all tangled up in theology and personality and ego and status and fear of losing our place and like just a whole bundle of things. We get caught up in the way that the dominant culture wants to rate us and put us on scales and judge us on all kinds of scales. We forget, because we're human, we forget that we are born naked and we leave the world very similarly. But when 2 or 3 people gather in the name of just about anything, we have a tendency to forget that. And that's exactly what the Pharisees were up to in our reading from the gospel. They wanted to make sure that everyone was following the rules. And Jesus said, well, none of that is important. And that kind of rankled with them. God's love overwhelms the rules. Allow yourself to get overwhelmed by the love of God, and your life will be different forever. Allow yourself to let go of doing it right all of the time or earning your place at the table, because that's a futile pursuit and a very slippery slope upon which every single one of us will one day lose our footing. Allow yourself to realize that we are all at once lost and found. Lost in all the impossible rating scales and measures of worthiness that we can see around us, and found by the astounding love of God. In this 15th chapter of the Gospel of Luke, we find Jesus talking all about the gospel reaching out to gather lost ones. The community that gathered around Jesus included lost ones, left out ones, left off the list ones, out in the cold ones. And in Luke, Jesus has been traveling around Galilee and just saying what he says about the astounding love of God, the all-inclusive love of God in people's houses and over meals and teaching and healing. And over time, his reputation has led to the reality that a fairly wild collection of leftovers of the human condition have gathered in community, following him wherever he goes. And those who want the community to be clean and well-ordered and nice and pure are struggling with that. This is a weird-looking group of people. I mean, look at the company he's keeping, they say. He welcomes sinners and actually eats with them. That's just unseemly. And today we hear his response to that. He offers 3 parables. We read the first 2, but there are 3 in a row, and they're very, very similar. You have the lost sheep. You have the lost coin. You have the lost child. I love the way he puts it to them, because he just goes straight at it. Which one of you, if you have 100 sheep and you lost one, would not leave the 99 in the wilderness and go off in search of the one? The thing is, that's a real dilemma. Would you really risk the 99 for the sake of one? Would you? Or would you cut your losses? Gee, I hate losing sheep, but I got 99. Seriously. But Jesus, in Jesus' world, in the gospel way, you just never give up. You just don't. And when that one is found, there is great rejoicing. And then he says, which woman, householder, having 10 coins and losing one, would not search night and day, day and night, until that coin is found? And here we are having a dilemma again. When do you stop? Do you search for a day? How about 2? How about 3 or 4 or a week? When do you stop and cut your losses? In God's gospel way, in Jesus' way, you never give up. You just never give up. And then, in the piece of writing that comes right after our reading today, he takes it the next step. And this isn't about sheep or coins anymore. It's about people. And he tells the story of the lost son, the prodigal son. And the implication is clear. There's no getting around it. which one of you would have cut him loose? Is there ever a circumstance in which human losses are okay? Jesus is saying that the heart of God is stirred by the suffering of people, and God rejoices in restoration, in reconciliation. This is a preferential option for the marginal, for the folks on the edge. And he has discovered that there is a whole lot of people on the edge as he goes around Galilee talking, because they all gather around him. In fact, if any of us are really honest about our lives, I mean a roundup kind of honest, every one of us can find ourselves on the edge for one reason or another. Maybe we have. Maybe you have. Every one of us can be lost or found for one reason or another. So the community of the gospel, to which Jesus is calling his community and calls us, is a community that respects that and is humble enough to admit that, and are just living in the joy and the freedom of a love which searches us out and finds us and brings us home. So the community of the gospel is one that is humble and rejoices. And those are two markers of the gospel: humility and joy. There's a line in the anthem that you are about to hear that goes like this. Well, I don't know which way you're going. I don't know if you're lost or found. All that I know is you've been forgiven. I tell you, this train is glory bound. I love that line. Because I don't know all the details of your life. None of us really even know all the details of anyone's life. In some ways, including our own. Well, I don't know. Who am I to ever say whether you are lost or found? And that's what Jesus is saying to the Pharisees. Who are you to say who is lost or found? He didn't judge them for their theology or their approach to faith or life or anything. He just simply said, I don't know which way you're going, whether you are lost or found. I will simply tell you what I do know. And that is, in the great sweep of God's love, you're forgiven. It's done. It's over. You're free. You're loved. And there is nothing you can do to control that. Whether you accept it or not, well, that's up to you, but it's there. It's reality, according to the gospel. Now, God knows we don't always do a perfect job of showing it. But everyone who walks through that door on a Sunday morning or a Wednesday afternoon or any other time is going somewhere. Lost or found or somewhere in between. And every one of us is variously rich or poor or somewhere in between. And when it comes to faith, every one of us is filled with certainty or filled with doubt or somewhere in between. And we are man or woman or somewhere in between, gay or straight or somewhere in between, young or old or somewhere in between, far from home or somewhere in between. And I don't know which way it is for you today. But this I know. you are loved, you are forgiven, you belong, you are free, and you are welcome in the community of the lost and found.